Using David's life as an illustration. And David had many giants in his life. He had many things that he had to go through, and he overcame a lot of them. Yeah? Alright, first up, I don't have any outline or anything because I've never had enough time, but I'm just going to say the first one is negative influences. Or more so, the negative things that affects us daily. Okay? So before David was a king, he had brothers. He had 7 brothers. He was the last out of all of them. And I mean, I cannot speak for David because I'm the first, but maybe for Gino. Yeah, Gino. But if you're the last person out of your brothers, it's kind of like you become the end of the stick or the butt of the joke kind of thing. And a lot of times you get to do the dirty work that your older brothers doesn't want to do. So sometimes I would pass like washing dishes to my brother, or I would pass like folding clothes to Gino or to AG. So that was kind of like the life of David at the time, where he was always the end of the stick, the butt of the joke. He always had to do the dirty work that his older brother did not want to do. Even his dad probably never liked him as much as he liked the first 7. At the time, the brothers were in the army, or they were somewhere doing some great stuff. I guess the dad was proud of, while David was taking care of the sheep. And I guess it kind of reminded me of like expectation of parents, or how your parents want you to become a certain thing because that's what they wanted for you to become before. And sometimes when we do that, we're not really following what God has told us to do. Unless that's what God told you to do, is to follow your parents' footsteps. So I'm like imagining Jesse, the dad, David's dad, comparing David to 7 bros. And like how the bros were in the army, and how David was just this guy that was taking care of sheep, and he likes to play the harp, he likes to play musical instruments. There's nothing wrong with that. But I guess I kind of see it as like, in Jesse's eyes, it wasn't as cool as being in the army, that kind of thing. And just with that, there's this time where Samuel, he was a prophet that was sent by God to go to Jesse's house. He said to him that in Jesse's household, there's going to be a new king of Israel, because God was tired of Saul already. Saul was just doing any kind of thing. Saul was not godly already, I guess. So God wanted to replace him with David, but David did not know yet. So Samuel was sent to Jesse's house to tell them that in his household there's going to be a new king of Israel. What happened? He went to the house, saw Jesse. Jesse brought brought 7 of the brothers, leaving David aside. Wow! Like, what kind of dad is that? Like, wow! Like, you left. You called all 7 except the one, and he was the actually one that was going to be the king. So it's kind of imagine if that was you being left out all the time. Imagine if you were always the butt of the joke, and it's not the kind where like, oh, sorry we left you because we were at Walmart. It's like the kind where like, oh, we left you, we had dinner. It's not really dinner except you. That hurts, right? Like, to me that would be like, oh, that's job. I don't feel loved, like my parents still love me, like my brothers, they don't care about me, you know what I mean? So I feel like that's what David was going through when he was growing up with his bros and his dad. So for me that would hurt so much, and it would take a toll on me. There's even times where when Saul was so jealous of David, this is after David defeated Goliath, and Saul decided to try to kill David 3 times in his household in the palace. And imagine if that's you, like being haunted in the palace, like the king is trying to kill you. If that was me, I don't know, like I would really feel hurt. Like I don't even know if I would want to stay in the palace anymore, or in that place anymore, right? so it would make you feel really drunk. But I believe David did not pay attention to these negative things around him. I think if he paid attention to them, I don't think he would be the new king of Israel. If he paid attention to these negative things around him, the put downs and like that, I don't think he would be the new king of Israel. He did not let his accusation, persecutor, the put downs to affect him. And instead, he focused on God and decided to tune out the negative influences that he had. So for the conclusion for this part, I just made little conclusions in everyone. So to slay this giant, you must focus on God and tune out the negative influences. To slay the negative influences around you, so you must focus on God and tune out the negative influences. Alright, first one's done. Second giant you need to slay is yourself. You gotta slay yourself. Slay yourself, slay your own pleasures, because it may lead you to do wrong things, things you will regret, things that you are not proud of. I'm not saying that pleasures is bad, but if we are not careful, it may lead to things that we are not in control of. It may lead to things that we are not proud of. There's a story, it's a famous story. Actually, a lot of David's stories are famous, but there's a story when David saw Bathsheba. You guys know this story, right? When David saw her bathing, and how David was so consumed with lust for this woman. And it would have been cool if David looked. He did look. It would have been cool if he looked away and ran as far as he can from her. Don't get that first part. Just get the second part. Let me repeat that. It would be cool if David looked away and ran as far as he can from her. But instead, David did the opposite. He actually went to a step further than that and had an affair with Bathsheba. David wanted Bathsheba for himself, for his own pleasure. But at the time, Bathsheba was already married to Uriah, one of David's soldiers. So this is what I mean when we are consumed by our own wants, by our own happiness, our evil happiness kind of thing. We can do some things that's not good, and maybe not to the extent, but we can do some things that we are not proud of. If we are not careful, we would just want more for ourselves. We would just want more for our own happiness in our own selfish way, instead of helping people that are around us, instead of loving people that are around us. We would be lovers of ourselves, and in the Bible it talks about that in the end times. That we will be lovers of ourselves, and we won't care about other people around us. It's always going to be about me. It's always going to be about how I feel and what I want and what I need and what should I do for myself. Our selfish ways can lead us to self-destruction, so we need to be careful. Jesus was a perfect example of being selfless. We already know that. Jesus always had the best intention to whoever he encountered with. It doesn't matter if he rebuked, he told them to not follow him, or he told them to become his disciples. Jesus always knew the best for them. We cannot question it because we are not God, but Jesus is God. We just have to trust that he knows what's best for those people that he spoke to. Another thing is the best one. He died on the cross for our sin. Dying for somebody is like the most selfless thing you could ever do. And for the only God to die for you, how selfless is that? He's not just a random human being. He's not just a random person. He was God in the flesh. And for him to die for you, for us to don't go to hell, that's pretty selfless. He takes your burden. He takes our burden. So in conclusion for this one, there's a second one, right? Yes. We need to learn to be selfless with one another, because if we are selfish, we with one another will end up just hurting each other. To slay your giant, look at the example of Jesus and be selfless. To slay your giant, look at the example of Jesus and be selfless. Smart. So, I had this idea where I wanted to do, they're not like really gigantic, but like they're like boxes. I kind of wanted people to slay them. I hope they're not like broken already. Gino, come. This is Gino's face. And I just kind of wanted people to slay. And the first one was influence, and the second one was yourself. So it's a dangerous one. Ready, Gino? Give it a go. I ain't got no time, dog. Slay it.
Gino!
Wait, no, over there! Go outside! This way! Alright, ready? 3, 2, 1, go! Sorry. Alright, that was fun. That was fun. I feel like nobody's watching us.
You're on live.
I'm on live? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Pastor Alan. This was your idea, Pastor Alan. Let's just keep going because there's a lot of boxes that I want to split. Alright, number 3. This giant is your mind and thoughts. Worldly thinking, worldly thoughts. We always say that the battle starts in our mind, and that is very true. We need to slay our thoughts in our mind so we can have only godly things in our head. So I'm going to go back to the Bathsheba and David incident again. There's a lot of things that I could use in that, that's why. So, again, if David's mind and thoughts were more stronger than he was, only if he only had godly thought at the time when he saw Bathsheba, then there would be no affair with her. He should have never let his lust consume him. His lustful thoughts consume him. He should never let his lustful thoughts consume him. When David saw Bathsheba, David should have done all he can to fight out temptation. He should, like I said, he should have ran away as far as he can from that. David should have stood his ground and fight. David should have not let his mind wander off in lustful thoughts and lustful imagination with this girl Bathsheba. In the books of Romans chapter 12, if you can put that up, Christoph, and it's verse 1 and 2, I think. Oh, it's hiding. Oh, it's kind of hard reading that. Anyways, I'm just going to read from NIV and just the parts. I don't even understand, you guys. So verse 1, so basically it's talking about making your body as a living sacrifice that is pleasing to God. And then the second part, which is my favorite, it says, do not be conformed any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed in the renewing of your mind. Okay? So then don't let your mind control us. Don't let ungodly thoughts consume you. Instead, do what Paul said, to make your body a pleasing sacrifice to God. Do not use your body to hurt anyone or to hurt people or to hurt yourself. To renew your mind daily, to replace ungodly thoughts with godly mindset. So for conclusion for this one, to slay your giant is to renew your mind daily, replacing them with godly mindset. To slay your giant is to renew your mind daily, replacing them with godly mindset. Alright? Awesome. What was that next? 4th is pride. The next giant is pride. The pride. So the giant pride, sorry. So the next is giant. Okay. The next is pride that we need to slay. Okay? And pride could be one of the biggest sources to open more sin too. And it's kind of saying like, when you touch pride, it's like you open up a can of worms. Sorry, I don't know where that came from. But yeah, pride can make you do things to people and to yourself that you don't want. Pride can easily hurt anybody. Pride for your high status, or pride for your riches, or pride for always wanting to be right, or etc. There's a lot you can do with this. And nothing against our story again. So there's a story again with David, and this is when Satan provoked David to count how many soldiers he has. And this is so Satan provoked David, and he asked David, David, how many soldiers do you have? And at the time, David was already an established king. He was already successful. He was feared by many people. He had a lot of resources. He didn't need a lot of help from people. He could help himself, He was really up there as a king. And so David, he counted how many men he had. And I could imagine, I could see David thinking like, yeah, I got enough, man. I got enough. I got enough to defeat any army right there. I'm good. Yeah, I got enough soldiers. I'm not afraid of anything. Or I got enough. No worries, I get them. I'm scared of nothing, I get them. And after he got the survey of how many men and soldiers David had, about 70 men died from the plague. 70 men died from a plague. You see, counting his soldiers wasn't a sin. That was not a sin. But it was the reason why. When David decided to count how many soldiers he had, it was his pride that took over. When he counted, he saw it as, it's my army, it's my soldier. When in reality, the Israelites were God's people and they were God's army. The Israelites belonged to God, not to David. David might have been the king at the time, but God was the King of Kings, and that includes David. When David counted, he put all of his faith into himself. Seems like David did not need God anymore, yeah? David depended on his own abilities rather than depending on God, because he thought he doesn't need anyone's help. He thought he could just do it himself. When you refuse help from God, no matter if it's good or it's bad, it doesn't matter if it's in good times or bad times, it is pride. So when we think we don't need God, then that is major pride. We need to slay pride in our lives because it can lead us to a lot of hurt. And it can do things to ourselves, it can do things to others. To slay pride, we must humble ourselves before God. We must humble ourselves in what God has given us. So let's continue to Romans. Can you verse 3? Put out. Hopefully that's better. Verse 3 for Romans 12. Still the same. I must read it in NIV. For the grace given me, I say, every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance to the measure of faith God has given you. Let's never think that we are higher than anyone else. Especially, let's never think that we are higher than God. So in conclusion, to slay the giant, you must stay humble and always allow God to take over instead of yourself. All right, round 2. Taylor, come here. It's Taylor's turn. It's still Gino's face though. Play music. Red, hit him hard as you can. Ready? Ready? And 3, 2, 1. Oh, that's so fast. Yes, sir. Take your shoes over there. You okay, one? You need to go constantly, one. Oh, shucks. Scared of you. Alright. That's like 4 slayed giants already. Slayed 4 giants. Oh, they're like small giants. All right, so let's move on. All right, so the fifth one, the fifth giant is past mistake. Fifth giant is past mistake. Oh, actually, move to the fifth. It's kind of hard. All right. So another one is this giant that poses a threat in our life is past mistakes. Sometimes it just takes one mistake from the past to ruin us, to wreck us, to make us feel unworthy, to stop us from growing. It takes just one reminder of the past and it really shatters us up. It really breaks us apart. It wrecks our relationship with people. It wrecks our relationship with God. And again, we're going to go back to Bathsheba. I promise this is the last one. It's the last one of Bathsheba. Yeah, I promise. So again, the same story. David committing an affair with Bathsheba. And yeah. So when the affair happened, David had to figure out how he was going to hide it. How he was going to hide what he'd done with Bathsheba. He made a mistake. He said, oh man, I gotta figure out how to hide this. How am I gonna hide this? And so he didn't want to get caught with his mistakes. He also did not want Uriah to find out Bathsheba's husband at the time. So David came up with a scheme to cover up. This guy always coming up with things. He came up with a scheme to cover up his mistake. He sends Uriah to battle. David knew that if he sends Uriah to battle, most likely Uriah will die. Most likely he will be killed in war. Killing Uriah is the only solution that David could think of to cover his mistake at the time. And after Uriah has been dead, David's plan was to take Bathsheba as his wife because she was pregnant with David's child. Wow, David. Seriously? For real, David? So this is just like a whole different level of wrong right here. David was so focused on his past mistakes that all he could think of is how to cover it up. You know, what should I do so I don't get caught? What should I do so Uriah don't know? What should I do so people don't know? What should I do so Bathsheba's baby doesn't look like me when he come out? You know, I don't know. So he had to figure out how to cover this up. And covering this up I don't know, it's hard to cover this up. So when you keep thinking about your past mistakes, you are bound to do another mistake. Let me repeat that. When you keep thinking about your past mistake, you are bound to do another mistake. So don't cover up because all you're doing is adding more problem to what you already have. Look what happened to Uriah. Imagine this. What if David admitted his fault and came clean to Uriah? What if after the affair, David spoke to Bathsheba and Uriah and came clean to them? I mean, Uriah would probably be super angry and super mad and want to kill David, but maybe at least the innocent Uriah would still been alive. There would be no Uriah's blood on David's hands. I don't know. Just thinking. There would be no guilt of having Uriah to be murdered just to cover David's mistake. After David did what he did to Bathsheba and Uriah, he felt remorse, he felt guilt, he felt he'd done something wrong. Yeah, he did something wrong. He did some messed up stuff. So did I too. So what if instead of covering up our past mistakes, what if we just confess them to God instead? Instead of thinking we can cover it up, what if we just lift it up all to the Lord? David did that, and he confessed everything to him. He asked God to forgive him for what he has done. So we must not dwell in our past mistakes. Instead, confess to God and ask for forgiveness. And also, if you have wrong people in the past, sometimes we just don't realize it. Pain can paralyze us. Feeling pain can make us turn our back away from God. It can make us do some things that we don't want to do also. It can hurt people because you are hurt. So we need to slay it before it gets us. David was in a lot of pain. He had many trials. He had many sorrows. He was rejected by Paul. He had to go through pain and guilt for what he had done, killing those 70,000 people because of his and even the things that he'd done with Uriah and Bathsheba. He had to go through all of that guilt and all of that pain that he got to go through. He had to go through that. The pain of his children's death and his children killing each other. Family issues that are really jacked up. The pain of being targeted always because he was the king. So we can say that David has a lot of pain in his life when he was in slavery. As a Christian, there would be many things that will come out of us and it will cause us pain. And this is just the reality. Pain will break us down. Pain will challenge us. That's just the reality as a Christian, is that we have to go through it. But when we go through it, think of it, what we can gain from it. What can I gain from this suffering? What can I gain from this pain? We have to go through this pain to learn. If you look at David's life, a lot of it, when David had done something wrong, or when David was through suffering, it taught him something. He learned something from it. Even though he had many cuts and scars, there's always this one thing that David never did. He might have been angry and confused at God, but David never turned back. He never turned his back against God. He never gave up on God, even when he was dying by himself alone. That same goes to us. It doesn't matter how hard or how painful it is. We must not turn our back to God. We must not give up on God. We keep going even though it hurts because there's something to gain from it. There's something to learn from it. And we as the Christians will suffer for Christ, so let's get used to it. In conclusion, to slay this giant, we must keep going. Even though it's painful, we must not turn our back to God. All right, round two. Christoph, over here. Come on, Christoph. Just slay this one. It's a good boy, nice picture. Yes, you have to. You gotta do it. Do it. Yeah. Shawn Michaels. This your music. All right. Oh no. Oh, don't eat that. Just use your foot. Jeez. Awesome. Let me just kick it to the other side. All right. Thank you, Christoph. All right, we're at the last one, 7th. So the last one, the last giant is fear. It's the last, but it's not the least. And I think by far, this giant could be the most dangerous out of all of them. Fear is probably the best way to paralyze a Christian. Fear can slow down the process of growth in Christ, and it can even stop our growth at all. Satan likes to use fear to show that we can't do anything. Satan likes to use intimidation to show that we cannot overcome. He likes to use that to slow our progress to slow our progress in the relationship with Christ. The young skinny David replaced the heart as a fearless David. At a young age, he fought against lions and bears to protect his sheep. At a young age, David did not know what fear is. We're going to go to the most famous story of David, and that is when he defeated Goliath, the giant. At the time, David was already in the palace serving Saul as a musician. And one day, he saw Goliath mock his God while he was to visit his brothers. The next thing you know, fearless David called Goliath out to a battle to death. And I can imagine David saying, Goliath, it's either you and I that's going to die tonight. You know when they call each other WWE or like WrestleMania? You gotta see that. It's like, Goliath, it's either you or me. It's going to die tonight. David laughed. Goliath laughed. He was like, oh, are you sure about that? But in reality, David was no match for this giant. In reality, David's physical body and abilities wasn't supposed to kill the giant. Now that's what I call fearless. So let's continue the story. Saul heard what David said. Saul tried to put his armor on him. It didn't fit because David was too small. And the Philistines set up a date. They made a Facebook invite to see David get killed. Let's continue. So at the battle time, David picked up 5 stones and he used his slingshot, hit Goliath in the head, then ran to Goliath, grabbed Goliath's weapon, and David slayed his giant. Ta-da! That's what happened. But imagine if David was the total opposite of those stories. Instead of fighting lions and bears to save the sheep, he would be running away, abandoning the flock. Or instead of letting his brothers and his father affect him, and not letting his brothers and his father affect him with the negative comments, he let them. Instead of calling out Goliath, David didn't even want to go to his brothers anymore because he heard there's a giant. If that's the David from the Bible, then he's nothing special. If that's the David from the Bible, then he's a coward. He's a wimp. Imagine if David was fearful. I don't think he would have became the king of Israel. I'm going to ask Rap to just play some holy music in the background. Yes. I've always wanted to do that. I don't know, it sounds cool every time it happens. When Pastor Allen would call him to play, and then it makes everything sound cooler and more holier. Finally get to use it, so thank you, Jesus, for the opportunity. But anyways, let's go back to David. Imagine if David was full of fear. Imagine David scared to even look at Goliath. But luckily, David wasn't like that. David stood his ground and defended his God. David was fearless because he knew that God was on his side. David overcome his giant by challenging him. David did not run away from his giant. Instead, he looked him in the eye and he said, I'm going to slay you today. David knew who he was with in the battle. David was favored by God, so he knew that even in the odds against this giant, it doesn't matter because God is with him. Same goes to each and every one of us here. God is with you. And He's going to help you slay that giant. Don't be afraid because God is there. In conclusion, to slay this giant, you must be fearless and know that you are favored by God. Just going to use, first off, if you can go to 1 Samuel 17:48. I'm going to read it. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. Let me read that again. As Goliath moved closer to attack David, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet Goliath. Why did David do that? Why did David run towards Goliath? Naturally, when the opponent's coming closer, when it's about to start to throw a jab or it's going to punch you, you naturally just back away. You naturally just dodge. You naturally want space. But David was different. He ran towards his Goliath and he defeated it. Before I slay this giant right here, thank you, Gina, for making this. You worked really hard. I just want to do one last thing. And there's this writer, Lucado, and he wrote this book, and there's a saying there that always stuck with me. Nikki, if I could just come in. It's going to sort of illustrate this a little bit. Martin. He said, look at each other. He said, when you focus on your giant, you stumble. Johnny and I come. When you focus on your giant, you stumble. Johnny. And the second part of the saying is that, look at John. When you focus on God, Johnny facing, then your giant stumble. We're just going to give you guys just a little time to reflect on what was said tonight. After I slay this thing, we're just going to give you guys time to just kind of ponder on what was said and really think about that. I'm going to slay this now. Sorry, Pastor, I don't mean to do this. Someone can just dim the light and we'll give you guys time to just ponder what was said.